Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. Ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. Ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. Hayya ala salah, hayya ala salah, hayya ala falah, hayya ala falah. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. La ilaha illallah.
All thanks and praise is due to Allah. We seek His help and forgiveness. We seek refuge in Allah from the evil within ourselves and the consequences of our evil deeds. Whomever Allah guides will never be led astray, and whoever Allah leads astray will never be guided. I bear witness that there is nothing worthy of worship but Allah, and that Muhammad is His servant and messenger. Sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Allah the Exalted has said, O you who believe, fear Allah as He should be feared, and do not die except as Muslims in submission to Him. And the Exalted has said, O mankind, fear your Lord, who created you one from one soul, and created from its mate, and dispersed from both of them many men and women. And fear Allah through whom you ask one another, and the wombs. Verily, Allah is ever watching over you. Verily, the most truthful speech is the book of Allah, subhanahu wa ta'ala. The best guidance is the guidance of Muhammad, the Prophet, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And the worst affairs are newly invented matters. Every newly invented matter is a religious innovation. And every religious innovation is misguidance. And every misguidance is the hellfire. With the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful. As we make the journey through life, some of us are privileged to make the pilgrimage to Mecca. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has sent us the black stone as one of His many signs. There is much speculation to its origin, and one theory is that it was a remnant of a meteor that crashed the earth thousands of years ago. The one thing that we can be certain of is it was created by Allah. It was stolen from its country and it was returned to its rightful place as the epicenter of Islam. When I say it was stolen, many people have tried to destroy it, many people have tried to desecrate it over the years. It was even for a period of time, I think of about 20 years, it was in another country. And then it was returned to the Kaaba. Alhamdulillah. In the interim, there were many attempts to destroy it. Today, it is the cornerstone of the Kaaba and is the most sought after point of reflection during the Hajj. For those of us who have made Hajj, they understand the significance of the black stone, because it is reported, and Allah knows best, that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam first of all put it in its place as the cornerstone. But it was also said that when he did, he kissed it and he put it there. So many people try to kiss it, try to touch it, try to be. I had a brother with me on Hajj. He almost tried to get in the stone. I had to pull him out. He gone into a trance, and this is something I saw. This is not something someone told me. I had to go back and get him because the people were beating him, and he wasn't coming out of that stone because it kind of takes you in. In fact, and Allah knows best. Again, it said that the stone can absorb your sin. Now, again, Allah knows best. These are things that are reported or heard, or said. We know that the stone was created by Allah. That we know. It was at one time tried to destroy it. In fact, if you've seen it or if you know what it is, it's actually pieces. But they were able to put it back together or join it. I won't use super glue, but it was a method in which they used a method for heating it and putting it back together. So it's really one stone, but it's been repaired or brought back together. And that's significant too. It was separated, now it's back together. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the best of planners. But if we take it back to Ibrahim and Ismail, his son, and we know Ismail was the offspring or the son of Hajar. Hajar was an Egyptian. She was a black woman by birth. Then my mind leads me to the significance of the African American people, and more specifically, those of us who are present today in America. What is the mission of the African American Muslim, or, if you would, the new African? Has Allah brought us to this point to be a mere footnote in history, or are we destined to rise to our roles as the vicegerent? The term they normally use is the Khalifa, the leader, the one who pushes this deen forward, peace be with Allah, the vicegerent of our Creator, Allah. As we believe and in fact know, all things start the beginning as servants of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is our parents or our guardians that introduce us to the belief system, and as such formulate our concept of worship. The enslaved African was forced to accept a partial reality of what God was, and in fact, who he was. A prime example was the story of Ham. It says that we were cursed and we were descendants of Ham. Well, in my estimation, if you know what Ham is the hind parts of the pig. Mm-hmm. So you've been relegated to the lowest of the low, if you accept that definition that someone else gave to us. By any interpretation, we were made to believe that we were the most despised people on earth and that we were less than human. What is greater, 3/5 or 1? The point is that the reality of Allah had been hidden over the centuries, and without truth, there is no reality. Allah is al-Haq. Nothing I say, nothing I do can change that. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the sure reality. And if we as Muslims can grasp that, inshallah, and understand that concept, it transforms our life. It changes us into something, inshallah, that we were not before we understood that reality, before we knew who we were, before we understood. And it's not a color. It's not about color. It's not about African. It's not about Egypt. It's not about Russia. It's not about China. It's about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and understanding who we are as his servants and his slaves. If we understand that concept, the rest of it is immaterial. Because then we're able to grow into that Khalifa that Allah has prepared us to be. Each one of us born, he blows his spirit into us. So that means we have his ruh, if you know that term, his spirit within us. So there's no reason for us to be depressed. There's no reason for us to be in despair. As they say, we should be running things. Why? Because Allah has given us the ability to do those things. The shortcoming is within ourselves. And we have to erase those things, remove those things that keep us from understanding that and keep us from rising to that level. Can we become a prophet? No. The Prophet ﷺ was the last prophet. Make no mistake about that. But his example, his direction, his guidance are the things we have to inculcate, take into ourselves. And then, not just benefit ourselves, benefit our families, benefit the world, inshallah. But Allah knows best again. The Muslim, regardless of color, has that truth and is able to make his way in the world today. And I am truly grateful, inshallah, to be a Muslim and to have been privileged to the knowledge of Al-Islam. Allah has brought us to its essence, and as a result, we cannot be hoodwinked, bamboozled, or run amok. So what is our role? In fact, it is to introduce these truths, if you will, to those who are lost. In fact, it is to civilize the uncivilized. The new African is to set the example in his way of living. He is to follow the Quran of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the Sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. He is to take the life lessons of Elijah Muhammad, El-Hajj Malika Shabazz, Minister Louis Farrakhan, and Imam Warifuddin Muhammad, and strain them through the reality of the Quran and the Sunnah. That's your reality. The life of the Prophet, the Quran that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us through him, from the angel Jibril, and all of the rightly guided caliphs, those who came before us, those who have the knowledge, and those who most assuredly are guided by Allah. How do we know this? You put the two together. You put the Quran and the Sunnah, and those who say that they follow that. And if those things jibe, if you would, or sit equally, they're correct. If there's some contradiction, you take the Quran, you take the Sunnah of the Prophet. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam told you, even if something he said or he did is contrary to what you find in the Quran, you take the Quran, because that's from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Everything else is human and subject, Allah knows best, to error. If we strain them through the reality of the Quran and Sunnah, we develop a formula for today's questions or queries, if you would. Last but not least, he should use his God-given intellect to solve the new problems with himself, his home, and his society. This is the mission of the new African, whether he chooses it or not. We must come together with like-minded, God-fearing Muslims first and foremost, to wake up those of us who are asleep. When you look, you can walk outside this door. You don't have to go far. You can walk outside your door every day, not just this door, your door every day. And sometimes you don't even have to go out your door to see people confused. Our job is to assist them if we can. But most assuredly, our job is to give an example that they can follow, to set the example that they can understand. You can't make anybody do anything. Only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can do that. But when they see you, inshallah, they should see the example of the Prophet. Sister Aisha, may Allah be pleased with her, said the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was a Quran walker. That's a tough job. Can you imagine? I don't know about the rest of you. I've been reading the Quran, Allah knows best, 30, almost 40 years. And every day, every time I read it, I get a little piece of something new. It's a living manuscript, if you would. It's not something that you read one time and say, okay, I got this. It changes every time you sit down and read it. But what is really changing is yourself, your understanding, and the God-given ability, the God-given knowledge that you have been blessed with. That's why you see something different. Because Allah is opening that perspective. He's opening that point of view to you. So do we not want this for ourselves, first and foremost? Do we not want this for our families? And do we not want this for the world? And don't by any means think that there are not those who will want to suppress this. It's not a people. It's a shaitan mentality that would enslave another man. It's a shaitan mentality that would rob another man. It's a satanic mentality that would shoot yourself up with drugs or shoot yourself, period, to take you out of your reality. This is not you. This is not me, because Allah has not created us like this. This is shaitan. We have to remove ourselves from that way of thinking. How do we do that? Turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Pick up that banner of God consciousness and understand who Allah is. It doesn't make any difference who I am. It doesn't make any difference who you are. If you submit yourself to the will of Allah, you're going to change. You're going to evolve. You're going to become a different person. And inshallah, you're going to become a better person. It's a purification process. When you look at salat, when you look at zakat, these things purify you. They make you better. They don't make you worse. if you practice them correctly, if you use them and ascribe to them as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given them to us. Inshallah. Those of us who have fallen, let me go back. We must come together with like-minded, God-fearing Muslims first and foremost to wake up those of us who are asleep. Those of us who have fallen under Shaitan's spell. Those of us who are subject to drug and alcohol abuse. Those of us who would be men or women when Allah has says we are men, women or men. Those who cannot help themselves due to moral, mental, or spiritual deficiency must be reached by any halal means necessary. The new African has a daunting task, but by the will of Allah, we will be undaunted. If we see ourselves as individuals, then there is little or nothing that can be done. If we begin to come together in a collective effort, then the task becomes less so. If we put our trust and faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then there is no obstacle that cannot be accomplished, inshallah. Who would have thought that you could go to the moon? Who would have thought that you could live on the ocean, sail around the world 100 years ago, 200 years ago, 4,000 years ago? Allah manifests these things in His time. We have to be patient and do what we are called to do until that time comes. The question of the day is, do black lives matter? Yes, all lives matter. And we must go back to basics. If we start with ourselves, and I'm looking around, then black lives matter. If we look at our families, then we see that all lives matter, because my daughter-in-law may be white, she may be Puerto Rican, she may be Chinese. So all lives matter, because the family unit may be more diverse in regards to ethnicity, or in regards to color. And surely if we look at society, the bigger picture, it's more diverse in regards to ethnicity. So we must establish a commonality that can be used as a basis for right or wrong. And that is God consciousness, or taqwa. Then we can remove the equation of race and replace it with the equation of right or wrong. And it's been a struggle for me to personally eliminate race. Why? Because I have been and continue to be a victim of racism. But that's just another word for shaitan. Anything that separates you, separates me, separates people, that's shaitan that comes between. So let's say you stand in ranks. Stand shoulder to shoulder. Stand toe to toe. So that Allah does, so that shaitan does not come between you. So if it's important in prayer, how much more important is it in your day-to-day life? How much more important it is as you go through life, dealing with your situation and your circumstance? Let us first pull together. Just as the black stone was subjected to atrocities in an effort to destroy it, so we must establish a commonality. That's where I was. Then we can remove the equation of race and replace it. What has allowed me to transcend this disease is a strong faith in the Creator. And it's a disease. Racism is a disease. It was created by somebody. It's not natural. Oh, excuse me. It wasn't created. Allah is the Creator. It was developed by somebody to separate. The best one, regardless of race, creed, or color, is the one who is the most God-fearing. As we move forward, let us try to eliminate our color consciousness and replace it with God consciousness. Let us remove black or right, black or white, and transpose wrong or right. This is the task that lies ahead of the new Africa. Just as the black stone was subjected to atrocities in an effort to destroy it, so will we as a people. Let us first pull together ourselves and then bring others into the realm of reality. This is how we defeat the tricks of Shaitan. His game is one of divisiveness and destruction, and he's played this game for millenniums. This is why we're divided today. This is why there's segregation today, racism today, differences of opinion today. If it wasn't for Shaitan, we would be as one, and we would know that, because Allah has created us as such. Shaitan has controlled the division and the divisiveness. His job is to deliver as many of us as he can to the pit of fire. This is in your Quran. It says, if you give me free reign, I'll bring all of them to hell. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, not his true servants. True servants are forfeit, if you would, of the hellfire. Does that mean you won't go to hell? You may, but you'll come out of it. It depends on your life here. It depends on what you've done here. Now, there's those of us who are fortunate. When you start looking at the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who probably won't even see it. They'll pass over, boom, like that. Some of us may be a little slow. We may get a little roasted. But inshallah, we get the opportunity to redeem ourselves if we follow Allah's prescription. If we turn our back on Allah, I fear to even think about that. But that's Shaitan's goal, to get us to turn away from Allah, says, from what Allah tells us to do, from who he says we are as men and women, for who he says we are as believers. Shaitan takes us out of that concept. Yet he is only a whisperer. You hear him talking about the horse whisperer and the ghost whisperer. These are entities, or people who can say something to an entity and it reacts to him. And there are people who can do that because they've studied it, they know how to do it. But what I'm talking about is the one who's the master at technology. Shaitan. He whispers in your ear, boom, you're gone. He whispers in your ear, you're gone, darling. You have to be stronger than that. You have to call on the Lord at those times. You have to call on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to remove that voice, that whisper from you. And most importantly, you have to call on Allah. Take him out of your life and take Allah into your life. Because we said at the beginning of this khutbah, if Allah misguides you, you're short. And if he guides you, you're straight. That's it. That's in a nutshell. That's it. When you look at the world today, unfortunately, the rejection of Allah is increasing. Homosexuality is on the rise. Crime is on the rise. Murder. Lack of self-respect. Another thing we have to think about is the sisters. The sisters, we think we got it bad up there. The sisters are catching it out there because there's little or no respect. Not within our community per se, I pray, but in the world at large. But it's also because we don't respect ourselves. If a man and or a woman respected themselves, they wouldn't get a lot of what they get. That's what we're trying to get to. That's where we're trying to raise ourselves from the mentality of, oh man, I'm just this, I'm nothing, I'm not that. Because that's when we abuse ourselves. And it can be in many situations, from drugs to lack of God consciousness, to poverty, unlimited. If we don't try to raise ourselves to the level that the Prophet ﷺ taught us to raise ourselves to, and try to become the Muslims that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has directed us to be. The new African must work to correct and overcome that situation. We are either of the party of Allah or the party of Shaitan. For me and my family, I choose the party of Allah, inshallah, and Allah knows best. Assalamu alaikum. Malcolm Little, Detroit Red, Malcolm X, El Hajj Malik Al-Shabazz were names that one of America's greatest freedom fighters of all time had in his lifetime. He was born May 19th, just a few days ago, 1925. He would have been 90 years old this week. had he not been assassinated and martyred in February 1965. That's what, 50 years ago? If my math serves me correctly. He was just short of 40. And the Quran tells us that 40 is the beginning of maturity. This is when you begin to stand up and be a man. You think you're a man at 10 or 20 or 30 or even 40. By the time you get this grade and get to be 60, inshallah, you should be a man. If you're not going to make it anyway. But the point I'm making, not just Malcolm, not just El-Haj Malik Eshafal, Dr. King, 39 years old. Those of us, as I said again, I'm going to repeat that, who are now 60 can understand having been 40 and what has been removed from you in that 20 years. When you take a man out at 40, you haven't even let him mature. It's like a flower. The flower's coming up into its growth, and it's almost at the stage of opening up, and the life is cut off. Unfortunately, we're losing our children like that. We're losing the youth like that today. What can we do as believers, as Muslims, to correct that? You know, I know, but most assuredly Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows. Let's try to help as much as we can. Let's try to create and develop a situation, inshallah, in which those youth have a chance to grow. Can you see Malcolm at 90, the knowledge he would have given? Can you see Martin Luther King at 90, the knowledge he would have given, what he would have delivered to the world? But don't get me wrong, that was their time. And there's no doubt about it, because this is when Allah called them to him. And we all have a time. It may be 10 minutes, it may be 100 years. Let's live that time as Muslims, inshallah. Let's ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us what we need to be the best of believers. If you do not know his story, then investigate who he was. And if you do know his story, then ask Allah to forgive him his sins and grant him paradise, as we do for all Muslims who have returned to Allah. The point is, his story is much like your story and my story, and the story of millions of Africans, the story of millions of people. But we're talking about the Africans now for a specific reason, who were brought to the wilderness of North America and left to fend for ourselves after having built this country and made it the nation it is today. Let us beg Allah to give us good in this world and good in the hereafter, and save us from the punishment of the hellfire. This is the dua that they make when they're on high, when they're crossing the Black Stone and when they're traveling. It's funny, I learned this dua when I was a grown man from some little kids right around the corner, Clara Muhammad School. They taught me that dua. The little children I'm supposed to be teaching, they taught me that dua. Rabbina atina fi dunya hasanatin wa fil akhirati hasanatin wa qina adhaban. 20 years ago, and I pray I never forget it. Let us beg Allah to give us good in this world and good in the hereafter, and save us from the punishment of the hellfire. Now that we are new Africans and have been reawakened to Allah's reality, let us strive to bring our brothers and our sisters of the human family to the truth, as Allah decrees it, so that we may all be delivered from the punishment of the hellfire. Ameen. Ikamati Salah.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah, ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. Hayya ala salah, hayya ala salah, hayya ala falah, hayya ala falah. Cut the comment to salat, cut the comment to salat. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, la ilaha illallah.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Maliki Yawmiddin. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم الصراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا ضالين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ويل لكل همزة لمزة الذي جمع مالا أكدلت يحسب إنه ماله أكلدت كلا ليوم بدان في الهتمة وما أدراك ما الهتمة نار الله المقالة إلا تأتي على الانفلة إن عليهم مؤصلة في أمد مؤمدة الله أكبر سمع الله لمن حمده الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا ضالين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والتين وزيتون وطور سنين وهذا بلد الآمين لقد خلقنا الإنسان في أحسن تقويم ثم رددناه أسفل سافلين إن الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات فلهم أجر غير ممنون فمن يكذب بعد بدين أليس يعلو بأحكم الحاكمين الله أكبر الله أكبر سمع الله لمن حمده الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر السلام عليكم ورحمة الله السلام عليكم ورحمة الله
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. Allahu Akbar. Very quickly, Dr. Sister, we want to thank you, man.